The speaker for the day, Dr. Imagulak. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Imagulak.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good.
You have to watch me because I don't get emails. Like I miss, I get so many that I miss some. So I'll have to put my disclaimer right now. I only knew about
Understood.
this within the last 48 hours. So I'm happy to talk about this topic.
Thank you again for participating. I know we've been doing a lot of other stuff and everything throughout the years and everything. So I'm kind of excited that it's on the other end now.
Yeah. Well, I hope you won't be disappointed.
I know I won't.
So we're waiting for a few people, right?
Yes.
And just so you know, I know I only have 10 minutes. So I didn't, I was trying to think about maybe I'll skip around a little bit the slides because I thought, oh gosh, I should talk about that. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, can't talk about that. I only have 10 minutes.
Right, right.
But I think, more for book club, it's probably good to get people's questions and kind of focus on that as opposed to me, giving you a spiel about something that maybe people are not that interested in.
Right, right, right. Honestly, thank you for preparing those slides in quick time because I know how late that came to you. So sorry about that again.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is, our virtual book and discussion club series. Thank you so much for joining us. We just give an extra minute for more people to join in, and then we'll officially start, if that's okay.
Hey, Casey, just let me know when you're ready to go.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. Well, my name is Sam Taylor. I'm a research assistant at Morehouse School of Medicine with the All of Us research program. On behalf of the team, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Today's topic is covering immunizations. We're just dispelling like fact and fiction. Quick question, if you can click your reactions. Who viewed the presidential debate yesterday? Quick reaction if we can. Now, I'm not trying to get political. I'm just asking because vaccinations were brought up as a topic, so it's very pertinent in relation to COVID-19. So we can flip to the next slide. I'm not going to go over all of the bullet points, but I just want to point out a couple. Immunizations prevent 2 to 3 million deaths per year. People 60 and up are more likely to get vaccinated, and the flu vaccine has prevented 4.4 million influenza illnesses during the 2018-2019 season. Just wanted to cover a couple topics. Can we flip to the next slide, and we're going to show a video pretty much explaining how vaccines work. You can go ahead and play that.
In 1796, the scientist Edward Jenner injected material from a cowpox virus into an 8-year-old boy, with a hunch that this would provide the protection needed to save people from deadly outbreaks of the related smallpox virus. It was a success. The 8-year-old was inoculated against the disease, and this became the first ever vaccine. But why did it work? To understand how vaccines function, we need to know how the immune system defends us against contagious diseases in the first place. When foreign microbes invade us, the immune system triggers a series of responses in an attempt to identify and remove them from our bodies. The signs that this immune response is working are the coughing, sneezing, inflammation, and fever we experience, which work to trap, deter, and rid the body of threatening things like bacteria. These innate immune responses also trigger our second line of defense, called adaptive immunity. Special cells called B cells and T cells are recruited to fight microbes and also record information about them, creating a memory of what the invaders look like and how best to fight them. This know-how becomes handy if the same pathogen invades the body again. But despite this smart response, there's still a risk involved. The body takes time to learn how to respond to pathogens and to build up these defenses. And even then, if a body is too weak or young to fight back when it's invaded, it might face very serious risk if the pathogen is particularly severe. But what if we could prepare the body's immune response, readying it before someone even got ill? This is where vaccines come in. Using the same principles that the body uses to defend itself, scientists use vaccines to trigger the body's adaptive immune system without exposing humans to the full-strength disease. This has resulted in many vaccines, which each work uniquely, separated into many different types. First, we have live attenuated vaccines. These are made of the pathogen itself, but a much weaker and tamer version. Next, we have inactive vaccines, in which the pathogens have been killed. The weakening and inactivation in both types of vaccine ensures that pathogens don't develop into the full-blown disease. But just like a disease, they trigger an immune response, teaching the body to recognize an attack by making a profile of pathogens in preparation. The downside is that live attenuated vaccines can be difficult to make, and because they're live and quite powerful, people with weaker immune systems can't have them, while inactive vaccines don't create long-lasting immunity. Another type, the subunit vaccine, is only made from one part of the pathogen, called an antigen, the ingredient that actually triggers the immune response. By even further isolating specific components of antigens, like proteins or polysaccharides, these vaccines can prompt specific responses. Scientists are now building a whole new range of vaccines called DNA vaccines. For this variety, they isolate the very genes that make the specific antigens the body needs to trigger its immune response to specific pathogens. When injected into the human body, those genes instruct cells in the body to make the antigens. This causes a stronger immune response and prepares the body for any future threats. And because the vaccine only includes specific genetic material, it doesn't contain any other ingredients from the rest of the pathogen that could develop into the disease and harm the patient. If these vaccines become a success, we might be able to build more effective treatments for invasive pathogens in years to come. Just like Edward Jenner's amazing discovery spurred on modern medicine all those decades ago, continuing the development of vaccines might even allow us to treat diseases like HIV, malaria, or Ebola one day.
All right, and that was it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for being here today. My name is Doris Aweka. I'm one of the research assistants with the All of Us research program at the Morehouse School of Medicine. Our speaker today is Dr. Lily Immergluck, a professor of microbiology, biochemistry, immunology, and pediatrics. She's a director at the Pediatric Clinical and Translational Research Unit at the Clinical Research Center, a principal investigator at the Morehouse School of Medicine's COVID-19 Prevention Network site, an associate professor at the Emory University Rollins School of Public Health, a pediatrician, pediatric infectious disease specialist, and population health service researcher. She's also a member of the Executive Council and the section on infectious diseases at the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Lily Immergluck got her undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree at the Northwestern University in biochemistry, molecular biology, and cell biology. She attended the Morehouse School of Medicine and got a degree in Masters of Science in Clinical Research, and got her doctorate at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. Her research interests are in health disparities, associated preventable conditions, and antibiotic resistance, and immune-mediated factors associated with resistant staphylococcal microbiome impacts on children. And she's a healthcare-associated infectious disease specialist. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We appreciate you, Dr. Immergluck. Thanks for taking out time for being with us today. And you're most welcome. Over to you, Dr. Immergluck.
Okay, thank you and welcome. And I think what I'm going to do is, can I share my screen? Would that be okay?
Yes, you can.
Okay, let me, oh, nope, host disabled.
Okay, let me correct that. Sorry, give me a second.
No worries.
All right, she should try now. You should be set up as co-host now, Dr.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Cool,
you.
thank you. That's all right.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, away we go. Now I'm going to flip through some of the slides because I think I want to leave room for encouraging a robust discussion about this topic. And so I may kind of not, pause a lot in between the slides, but Anyway, I have been giving the lecture about immunizations for over 20 years to our medical students and residents in pediatrics, because as a pediatrician, vaccines are something that's near and dear to me. And then also as an infectious disease specialist over the years, I've really seen the impact of vaccinations on the health and wellness, specifically on specific vaccine preventable diseases. But today's discussion, really, I want to focus more on how it relates to what we're doing during this pandemic that seems to be never ending. And specifically, the learning objectives for today is to quickly go over the importance of vaccine and preventing disease during COVID-19. And that video was a really nice kind of summary about the history and kind of evolution of vaccine development. Key vaccines that we want to keep up with in this upcoming season. And particularly, I'm not going to focus on all the vaccines, but really on the flu vaccine for specific reasons tied to COVID-19. Discuss and learn about upcoming considerations surrounding flu and some of the things that we're doing here in Atlanta on that matter as part of a statewide coalition to try to address some of the disparities on COVID-19. And lastly, to round it out by talking about the overview of development of COVID-19 vaccine trials, for which Morehouse School of Medicine is a part of the US COVID-19 Prevention Network. So some of the COVID-19 statistics to frame our conversation and kind of set the tone about why we're talking about this article and the ramifications of that as it relates to vaccines. This is outdated information, but the take-home message is that you can look at the total number of cases of COVID-19 across the US and the disproportionate number that affect minority communities. That still holds true, it's just that the numbers are actually even higher. And this is on COVID confirmed cases, basically, again, emphasizing that minority populations are disproportionately affected in severity as well as just total numbers. So, you know, the importance of vaccines is that it gives broad parts of the population as a whole some level of immunity. Okay, and I consider that very important as far as the COVID vaccine objective number 4 in ending this pandemic. And I'm going to share with you why. We know that disparities exist among those who receive vaccinations of any kind, which further leads to additional compounding the disparities that we see from illnesses which are vaccine preventable. You've heard in different sound bites on the news media this issue about herd immunity. And herd immunity is that we as a population may benefit if we are not vaccinated, if a percentage of the population is actually vaccinated. So this accelerates when significant rates of the population and the community are vaccinated. And we believe that for any disease, that a level of herd immunity is necessary in order for all of us to benefit from that. So the CDC has basically issued this statement, and I'll just read it just to be complete, because I do think that sets a tone about immunization and the importance of it. Ensuring immunization services are maintained or reinitiated is essential for protecting individuals and communities from vaccine preventable diseases and the outbreaks, and reducing the burden of respiratory illnesses during the upcoming influenza season. And I say that because I really want us to focus on trying to do what we can to increase the vaccination rates against influenza. So in general, why vaccinate against germs? Viruses and bacteria, which are these germs, are unpredictable. So immunizations are a tool that we can use to eliminate that threat. I'm a pediatrician, so it's from your child, but you can substitute that word with adult or any person who is eligible for a vaccine. By immunizing, you prevent letting these dangerous viruses and bacteria get a foothold. Okay, so for example, many of us probably from the initial gleaning there, I see that many of you are younger than me, but I still remember chickenpox. And I remember that, you know, we used to have like chickenpox parties, like if somebody got chickenpox, we'd all like run to that person's house and hopefully get it. And then that way would provide us immunity from having kind of a full blown presentation. So, but the reality is that chickenpox, which is now vaccine preventable. And when I give this the residents and medical students a lecture, many of them have never seen chickenpox. And that is because this vaccine has been circulating long enough that most of us, or we have achieved that herd immunity that I talked about earlier. And that now we do not see the complications that I used to see when I was a younger person. So if you're infected with a germ that's vaccine preventable, you're likely to prevent yourself from getting vulnerable secondary infections like pneumonia in the case of chickenpox or some of the influenza. And that can be more serious than the germ itself had you not gotten these secondary infections. So immunization optimizes a chance to avoid these types of complications. One of the questions that I was asked to maybe think about was to understand why are all vaccines not 100% effective. And the video alluded to a little bit about why that is. Basically, some people have undetected immune conditions that prevent the vaccine from working fully. This is another reason why the importance of vaccine trials are important to prevent or to optimize the number of people, the different population, because we're all different in our immunological makeup, so that we can have immunity that we know will work and protect us. Some people cannot receive vaccines due to specific age or specific health conditions. Again, when I talk a little bit later about the phases of clinical trials, this is a reason that helps us understand, what ages or what specific health conditions might not lend itself to having optimal immunity against a vaccine preventable condition when that person gets a vaccine. Community protection or herd immunity is really important. And in order to achieve that, whether it's by natural infection or by vaccination, once you get to a level, then the other people in the population would, by default, be protected from that. So that's what's really key for us to try to remember as we think about influenza, as we think about COVID. Each disease and vaccine has a different threshold that's required to achieve community immunity. Sounds like a tongue twister. And that's because each virus or germ has a different level or degree of infectiousness. So for example, some things that are highly contagious like pertussis or measles, well, you really need 95% of the community members to be immunized in order to have that protective immunity for that, the people who are not immunized. So every virus or every bacteria that's infectious, there's a different level of transmission that has to be factored in as far as determining what level of immunity do you need in the community to help the others. The coverage to protect a community varies by each disease, and we talked a little bit about that. What we see over in the United States and also globally is that vaccination rates vary geographically. And in some areas where there are highly unimmunized populations, you will see outbreaks or clusters of outbreaks. And it may be in a closed community or maybe not. And that's where we see kind of the spread, almost like different hotspots coming up, but you have an epicenter where that started. Okay, I'm keeping track of time here. Yeah. Okay. This is to address learning objective number 2, which is really, this is a whole host. CDC's puts this out every year. And on the left-hand column, you can see all the vaccines that are recommended and then the age group across the horizontal timeline and which ones are recommended and what, how many doses. I'm actually just going to focus on influenza for the interest of time. And because I think that as we head into flu season, it's important to understand why we want to try to increase influenza vaccination rates among all of us. Not a play on words there. Okay. We know that from last year that the Georgia flu deaths increased and many Georgians or people living in the state were hit hard by this. And the reality is that many of us are not vaccinated against influenza for one reason or the other. During the 2019-2020 flu season, the flu vaccine was reduced in terms of visits to the doctor by 39% overall. Now, part of that is that people recognize now that the effectiveness of that vaccine was was off. And that's because every year how flu works is that a flu vaccine works is that we try to predict what's going to be the circulating strains for the upcoming season. And so then we make a flu vaccination that's targeting those particular strains. So there was a slight mismatch, or there's another strain circulating around, then the effectiveness of that vaccine may not be as good one year compared to the other. So we estimate, or CDC estimates as many as 39 million to 56 million people got sick from influenza last season, and 410,000 to 740,000 were hospitalized, resulting in up to 62,000 people who died in this past season. Well, that's a big number to me, and I think we can do better this year in particular, because I think because flu is a respiratory virus, just like SARS-CoV-2 is a respiratory virus, that we don't want to see the amplification of the two of them together. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, reducing the overall burden of respiratory illnesses is important to protect vulnerable populations at risk for severe illness. It protects the healthcare system and other critical infrastructure. So it's all around, we have got to do all we can to decrease the respiratory illness burden. And a large contributor of that during the upcoming months is due to influenza. I've already talked about this earlier, but basically, again, flu and COVID-19, because of the symptoms are very similar and the transmission pathways similar, we really want to do what we can to diagnose it, to prevent it during the next several months. I'm not going to go through this because I'm running already out of time, but let me just talk a little bit about the last objective, which is really talking about the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. Up in the left-hand corner describes the phases of a clinical trial. Some of us in this book club have some familiarity with that. I listed some of the vaccines candidates that are up and where they think they are in the process of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. And I'm going to explain that in just a second. So if I can just have a few more minutes, I will quickly go through the explanation of the COVID vaccine trial development. In general, what we think about is for making vaccines is that we want to get to the point of licensure, get to the point of having sound recommendations that's driven by science and data, and understanding what are the elements for requirements of the vaccine that makes it all the way through the different hoops. So licensure in general just means that it's been approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. The process for pharmaceutical companies to start a vaccine can take years. And so like in the example I talked about earlier with the varicella vaccine, that actually took about 11 years to be licensed by the FDA from start to finish. And the stages toward licensure is what I'm going to share in the next couple of slides, with moving from preclinical trials all the way through the different phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 clinical trials. Recommendations, it only occurs after the FDA licenses the vaccine. So after that, there's a group called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, also known as ACIP. And this group, which is composed of both scientists, physicians, public health experts, as well as lay community, advises the CDC and also the Committee on Infectious Diseases for the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the American Academy of Family Physicians, in terms of what should be the recommendations as far as when the vaccine should be given, who should get it, and they factor in costs versus benefits, and they also factor in priority groups. Requirements is down basically governed at the state legislature and health departments as far as whether a vaccine is required. And this comes into play about issues in terms of affordability to pay for the vaccine for those who normally would not be able to pay for them. So there's a lot of factors that go through these main 3 areas, but I'm going to focus mainly on, I'm having trouble with my, the phases for you. So basically for a clinical study, for a therapeutic agent, in this case, it'll be vaccines. We go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and this summarizes it as far as what are the big ticket items of what it's trying to achieve through each phase. For phase 1, we try to assess whether this vaccine is safe, And then we usually start with lower numbers. And then phase 2, we go and increase the numbers, but we are asking the question about what are the most common short-term side effects. And then how are the volunteers who are participating in these phase 2 trials responding to the vaccine? Phase 3 is where we really ramp it up and we want to say, who's getting sick from this disease? Do we have enough people who look like the people who are getting sick from this disease? And so and do we have enough numbers to say, wow, if they have, a side effect to this vaccine that we think has already passed through phase 1, phase 2, are we capturing that? So we really want to try to get enough persons who reflect the population of where you want to distribute that vaccine. And for this, it's a global pandemic, so we really wanted to make sure we capture people from all over the world. So in general, I'm giving a little more detail about the phases of a clinical trial in terms of what's involved in vaccine development. And the preclinical, which sometimes can take years to do, is usually kind of where it all starts. It's in a research laboratory. It's tied with academic university or medical center or a biotech company. And basically they have a concept and they say, gosh, can we develop something that will prevent people from getting disease from this germ? Once that kind of gets solidified, then we move into what we call phase 1. And phase 1 usually, on average, takes about 1 to 2 years, where they test a small number of healthy adults. These are placebo-controlled. In other words, we really want to see if we didn't know who's getting vaccine and who isn't, can we detect any differences in terms of the safety of the vaccine, what kind of reaction they might have to the vaccine. Are there things that we can add to the vaccine that will make it more immunogenic, or in other words, develop a better antibody response? From then we move on to phase 2. As I alluded to earlier, basically this is looking at the proper dose. Can we use a small dose, a medium dose, a bigger dose? And what's the best way to stabilize that vaccine so that it can be in a clinical or real world setting and not disintegrate or not be as effective? And then there's also the issue of establishing manufacturer considerations. These are the phase 3 and phase 4. Basically, at this point, we're just, again, trying to assess more details about the immune response that we all have, making sure that we capture and document whether or not people actually get disease after they get the vaccine, and also further assess the types of reactions that people might have to the vaccine. Once we hit phase 4, that's kind of after it's gotten licensed, we can do additional studies to monitor about more about, again, numbers and how that reduces the burden of the disease in the population. These are what we call double-blinded, placebo-controlled. So there's people, so as a researcher, I wouldn't know who got vaccine versus who got placebo. And I would not be part of that unblinding until we're at the end of the study. An example of how long it took to move influenza vaccine through the process is here. And then I'm going to end on, I'm going to skip through this, but I'll just end on, there's some of the challenges that we're working with the vaccine development for COVID in terms of durability of immunity, given what we are learning things as we go, and whether or not age or other factors have a role as far as that durability goes. I'm going to end here and just say that I do think that vaccines do prevent disease by helping us in terms of developing immunity to fight against the germs which cause these diseases. I really do believe we need to have that in order for us to see our way out of this pandemic. And I'll end on this note because you'll have all probably heard through some way, social media or otherwise, that we do have some vaccine trials that are up, and it's all part of a collaborative partnership between private industry and NIH. And then here's some helpful links. So sorry, I'm way over.
No problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Lilly, for sharing all this information with us. I assure you the questions are coming. I could, see people's heads bobbing and saying, okay, I have a question to ask and all that stuff. So those questions are definitely coming. But before, we go on with the question, I quickly want to acknowledge, our partners. that have helped us with marketing this particular event and planning it also. And that is the Gwinnett County Library, the Clayton County Library, and the Fulton County Library. If April is there, can you quickly say hi?
Hi, this is April from the Network of the National Library of Medicine. And yeah, thank you to our public library partners in the Atlanta metro area.
Thank you, April. Thank you. April has been, just so you know, April has been like very instrumental in making sure that this program and even the future ones we're planning come to light. So thank you so much, April. We're also partnering with the Atlanta Black Nurses Association, who's represented by Gia Daniel here today. Hi, Gia.
Hi.
Yes. Thank you so much for your partnering with us. I mean, actually, Gia is going to be going next with her part of the thing. And then, everybody get your questions ready. You can type them in the chat, or you can ask the question, basically raise your hand and ask the question. But we are on, all of us is on Facebook at All of Us MSM. We're on Twitter, All of Us MSM, basically all the social media platforms, including Instagram. So please go follow, like the posts, repost them if you can. Let's get the word out about this program. Gia Daniels, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Imagluck, for a wonderful presentation on vaccines. It was quite insightful, and I look forward to a robust discussion in a moment. But before we get to that, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Gia Daniel, and I'm here on behalf of the Atlanta Nurses Association to speak about what brought us together today, the All of Us Research Project. I'll start with a short video to provide an introduction.
Meet Ray. Ray lives on a farm. He loves playing kickball with his grandkids, but lately he's gotten a little slower and been visiting the doctor a lot more often. This is Kim. Kim lives in the city. She loves to exercise, cook healthy meals, and can't remember the last time she called in sick. They're both people, but not all people are the same. And yet, when we visit the doctor, our treatments don't look that different. Why is that? Because we just don't have enough information to do it better until now. Enter All of Us, the research program based on precision medicine. Precision medicine is a revolutionary new approach to treating and preventing disease that's personalized instead of one size fits all. By gathering health data from 1 million people like Ray and Kim and Trevor and Samir, our country's best researchers will be able to develop treatments that are as unique and complex as we are. With this new information, doctors will have a better understanding of disease so they can innovate the next great breakthroughs in medicine. Once enough people join, suddenly everything changes. Information becomes clear, patterns emerge, and simple data transforms into life-saving knowledge. This means that Ray and Kim's children and their children's children can live longer, healthier lives. By becoming one of the first 1 million people to volunteer, you can help reshape the entire future of healthcare for generations to come. If we can figure out how to fly, put a man on the moon, and connect the entire world, surely we should be able to improve the future of healthcare, not just for Ray and Kim or even you, but for all of us. Sign up at joinallofus.org. The future of health begins with you.
So the All of Us Research Program is an effort to bring together 1 million or more volunteers that reflect the rich diversity of the people living in the United States. The program is open to both healthy people and sick people, and to people from all communities to serve as a national research resource to inform thousands of studies covering a wide variety of health conditions. Contributing to All of Us makes it possible for our community to be represented in biomedical research. The All of Us program acknowledges that many people are skeptical and hesitant to participate in medical research, and with good reason. There have been unspeakable instances of unethical testing and research that was performed under the guise of medical treatment. However, this research program is seeking to be transformational in its approach to participation by adhering to important rules and regulations designed to protect the people participating in research. Additionally, the 1 million volunteers and all of us are partners in the research process, not patients, not just subjects, but true partners. The participants involved in program development, from having input on what data are collected, they have input on what lab analyses are done, what research is conducted, and how data gets returned. All of us will empower participants by providing access to the information gathered over the course of the program so that participants can use this information to learn more about their health. All right, so you may be asking, what's in it for you? Well, the value of participating in All of Us will resonate differently for each situation, individual, and community. And the decision to participate is personal. In the most generalized aspects, most people choose to participate in the program because it provides an opportunity to learn some of your own health indicators and get your own health data. It provides the opportunity to ensure that your community is included in the studies that may lead to new understanding and new treatments. It also provides opportunities to be a part of a movement to make our healthcare more precise, more personal, and more effective. It also creates opportunity to help create representative research. There are several ways for you to learn more about All of Us. We encourage you to visit any of these program sites, follow the program on social media, and view great videos on the program's YouTube page. Although in-person enrollment stopped due to the pandemic, the Morehouse School of Medicine All of Us research program has never stopped. They're always accepting new participant registrations online. So I encourage you to stop, take a moment, and enroll in the All of Us research program today at msm.edu/allofus, because together we can change the face of medicine. Thank you.
Muted. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Gia, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. So I implore everybody, please, please, please go on there. It's important that we do this stuff. Go on there and register to be part of the million or more who are invested in moving the future of medicine forward. Thank you very much. So we're going to go over to I think the discussion sections. Jeanette, you can take it away. All right. So the next section, actually, we're going to be discussing the facts and perceptions. Jeanette, I think that's you.
That's me. I was just waiting for the slides.
Oh, okay. All right. 1 second.
Mhm.
1 second. I am sharing right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. Okay. So we just want to start off with a couple questions. That was a great call to action. One thing that was mentioned in that call to action had to do with distrust and medical research. There's a lot of distrust in medicine in general, especially from the African American community. So I just wanted to ask you, Dr. Lilly, especially we talked about how important herd immunity was during your work. Casey?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. During your work, have you experienced any of this distrust with different medical trials you're working with, or treatment, or just giving vaccinations in general? And if you have, how do you deal with that or work through it?
So thank you for that question. That's really key. I have to say, as a pediatrician, vaccines are a topic that comes up often as far as hesitancy. Parents, caregivers, guardians are for various reasons, reluctant sometimes to want to, if you think about it, have their healthy child, baby, injected with something and then not knowing all the details of that. I have the privilege of working in academic medicine where I have time to talk to my families and really work through some of the reasons. And I think a big piece of what we try to encourage to our learners, medical students, residents, and so on is really listen to what it is that they are concerned about, because it's varied. It's not all the same. So as a pediatrician, sometimes it's related to things that they might have heard or from their friends, and different sources in social media. And I'll give you an example. I had a patient that came to me, the parent, and she was hesitant about giving the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine because she was concerned about autism and the link with autism. And she actually had two other kids who at the time were 4 and 7. And both of those kids actually were on the spectrum. And she worried about whether or not, now she had an 18-month-old, whether or not she should give MMR because, what she had heard. Long story short is, listening to her and hearing her concerns and wanting to try to address them, we worked through some of the challenges that she faced as far as some of her concerns about it. And we ended up waiting some time because I think one of her concerns was that her other children had some symptoms once they became of age 2 or so. In the end, she did come back and she did have him immunized. He's fine in terms of that, but was listening to her about that. Another is about the issue of having overload of antigens or molecules and how to address that. And I've done very different things to address that with my families. But bottom line, and what I'm trying to say to you is you have to listen to families and patients as far as what are their concerns about vaccines and vaccine hesitancy. So I have encountered that all along in terms of my career on that piece. As far as clinical trials, absolutely. I address that. Again, most of my clinical trials are with children. So again, there's a layer of, added, wanting to make sure that you talk about to parents something that's affecting their child, as opposed to the adult clinical trials where you're talking to the participant themselves. And, back to listening, really listening to what their concerns are and showing them what's the science behind why we're doing this clinical trial. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, that was very informative. Thank you. Janae, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. So I do have to, I do want to move along and ask some more of these questions. Some of these were already covered by some of this with this wonderful presentation you've presented us with, because we do know it does take a long time to create a vaccine. So another question that we do want to know is, do you feel like there's people that have more adverse effects versus those that have any complications at all?
From vaccines in general, or?
Yeah, from vaccines in general.
Okay. Yes. So, the value of clinical trials and doing them in this kind of stepwise manner is to address that very fact. So, at the very beginning of phase 1, you may be addressing you want to include it's healthy people. You're not worried so much about the makeup diversity of those healthy people. As you move into the later phases, you are. I mean, that is the point of them, of these later phase trials. You want the vaccine and the impact of that vaccine, you want to be able to say, you know, I've looked at a diverse population, and I believe that this is the response, and that we're going to be able to achieve this immunogenic level that will protect this population. If you had a homogeneous population, then how can you say that it's going to work on anybody outside of that population that you tested it on? As far as you know, adverse effects, I mean, that is the types of effects from vaccines that I've given. I'll give you another clinical example. So when I was a resident, we gave pertussis vaccine, and we used what we call whole cell pertussis. And I would have to give this communication with the parents and say, you know, there's a 1 in X number of chance, like 10,000, that your baby will have a high pitched cry, or that your baby will have a fever, and that you'll have to bring your baby to the emergency room so we can assess, because we knew that that was a potential risk factor. Fast forward now, you know, more than 20 years later, that's not even a consideration. We changed up that vaccine so we don't use the whole bacteria that's killed. We just take a piece of it, and we know that the baby or the child who gets that still is able to achieve sufficient antibody titers to protect them from pertussis, without having the worry that after they get the vaccine, there's this risk of high-pitched cry or fever. Most residents today, when I say to them, you know, when you give the vaccine, do you have any parents come back and say that they had a fever? We used to give babies like Tylenol or acetaminophen, you know, we told them to take it right after we gave the vaccine because we're trying to prevent them having a fever. Now we don't see that anymore. So again, these things, you know, evolve, and the only way we know about it is to see what adverse effects. Now, the serious adverse effects, we hope that we have caught all that, and we can say what's that risk for those serious adverse effects during those clinical trials.
Thank you, doctor. That was very good. And we also have another question. So with all the pressure that's going on, with creating this vaccine for COVID-19, and with you expressing how long it actually takes for, you know, this process to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and et cetera. So if this vaccine is distributed too quickly, what do you think is the worst case scenario?
Well, first of all, let me just say that, just to clarify, in the normal process, pre-pandemic, we're not in all this kind of emergency, or what they're calling a warp speed situation. The timeline I shared with you in the slides is what we're saying is average timeline for vaccine development to go through kind of preclinical all the way through phase 3, phase 4. Because of the fact that we are in a pandemic, and we recognize that we really need to figure out a way to increase the immunity of a significant number of the population, so that we avert more disease and death from COVID-19. Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't hear that feedback. Okay, are you guys hearing that feedback? That's okay. Anyway, what's being done is that there's a unique partnership between NIH, National Institutes of Health, and the vaccine sponsor, the pharmaceutical companies that are making the vaccine. That's unprecedented. So all that is to say that although that we are shortening the overall timeline to see the vaccine development move from phase 1 through phase 4, it's because that it's all hands on deck approach. It's not just letting the pharma company kind of, you know, pedal along with their normal usual process. The federal government, these companies are working together, and then they're you know, launching it all across the country as far as to ramp up the numbers of participants. Okay, if that answers your question or not, sorry. But that's trying to deal with how to accelerate this and move it without sacrificing the safety or the steps that are required to move it through the different phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and up to phase 4.
Thank you, Doctor. We had some, that was actually one of the questions that we were that was in our group chat. That was in our the Zoom group chat. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to go ahead and continue to ask questions. I know the doctor is excited to answer them. Sade?
Yes, I actually did see another question in the chat talking about over vaccination, like if that is a thing, especially when talking to children, and if it is a thing, what would be the effects of that? How would we know?
So one of the links on the website that are, sorry, my slide deck, and I'll finalize that slide deck so that people can have access to that, but is to the AAP website. And on there is this particular page that talks about the concern about having too many antigens compacted in a vaccine. So, you know, from my standpoint as a clinician and infectious disease specialist, and I saw when they started to make these combination vaccines, I was like, yay, because then I saw that you could, you know, address Haemophilus influenza type B, pneumococcus, you know, and pertussis in one little vaccine. But then I realized that some of my patients were coming to me and saying, you know, I'm worried about like injecting all these things that my baby's going to then develop, trying to get their immune response up against too many things, right? So what I've said to them, you know, is the following: you're protecting your baby against these bacteria, but it's not that we're injecting the bacteria into them, right? So it is taking it's like a picture, an image, and you're taking a piece of that image and you're putting that together with another image. So it's not like there's a bunch of things, you know, injected floating in your child's bloodstream. It's that we're trying to train the immune system to see whether you're looking at it this way or that way, that you'll capture and you'll be able to develop an antibody response. So I will refer you to that website because it talks about actually that in the early phases of when all of these vaccines were coming out in the 60s, 70s, 80s, there were many more kind of proteins that were put inside the vaccines in kind of separate units than what we currently see. It's less than it's 1/100th of that at this point. But that being said, it's, you know, if parents are concerned about that, there's a workaround that. To me, at the end of the day, what I care about as a clinician and a pediatrician trying to take care and prevent patients from developing these vaccine preventable diseases is to say to them, what is acceptable? And I hate to draw another clinical scenario, but I had a pediatric nurse practitioner who had twins, and she had trouble getting pregnant. So when she had her 33-week twins and she brought them in, she said, I'm so embarrassed. I'm a clinician, you know, and I'm worried about giving these, you know, 3 vaccines. It actually would equal 5 shots to my babies. She goes, is there a way that we can work around this? And she had taken time off. Anyway, long story short, I said, absolutely. What are you comfortable with? And she said, well, we're going to go to Jamaica. So can I just give the one vaccine that I think, you know, will be most important for my twins to have before we go on this trip? I said, sure. So we picked one vaccine and then we just spaced it all out, you know, which is not exactly what is on the recommendation for CDC. But to me, it was more important for me to make her feel comfortable as far as that immunization schedule. And for those vaccines, because so many kids and other adults are vaccinated against, that herd immunity was actually coming into play. So I knew that the risk for her babies, her twins, would be relatively low, that she would encounter somebody who had that disease. So we had the luxury of saying, okay, let's just go it here. And when you want to come back in a month, okay, come back in a month. We'll give the next dose. Whereas normally we would give all of them, you know, at one time. if that answers your question.
That was great. Thank you so much for that information. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about like the COVID-19 vaccination rolling out and whatnot. I know Doris specifically wanted to talk about that, so I'm gonna pass it over to Doris to address some of these questions to you, and one of the questions that's in the chat as well.
Thank you, Shade. And thank you, Dr. Imblog.
Sure.
Thanks for all the information. And thank you for dousing some of my worries personally today. So moving on to COVID-19, I'd like to ask, in recent days, there have been proposals to expedite the process for getting the treatment drugs and vaccination for COVID-19, to the market. Of course, this increases risks where steps are skipped or processes rushed. Are you comfortable with this expedited approach? Why or why not? And is there ever a time when the means justifies the end if safety and ethics are compromised? Not just for COVID-19, even for AIDS, for cancer? What's your take?
So let me first say that, we recently joined the U.S. network of COVID-19 prevention, which is to become a site for the vaccine trial for COVID-19. That being said, the steps that are put in place to accelerate the movement of getting these vaccine candidates to licensure are accelerated only by the fact that instead of 20 sites to a vaccine candidate, they're putting hundreds of sites out there so that we can get to the numbers that are needed faster. That's the acceleration we're talking about in terms of warp speed. In my estimation, and as a researcher, as a clinician, I can tell you, I would not be signing up to be a COVID-19 prevention network site if I felt like we were cutting corners on this or that. And I want to say again that as a physician scientist, getting us to this point, the reason that we are accelerated is the fact that we are trying to get to the 30,000 per vaccine candidate faster by in recruiting many more people than otherwise one pharmaceutical company could do alone. So that's what I'm telling you about this unique partnership of the federal, the NIH. NIH is really trying to say, can all you academic institutions out there, can you work with as far as launching yourself as a site so that you can recruit people from your community? So it's a concerted effort that makes us accelerated. It is not that we are shaving corners or cutting whatever. We are still following the protocols that are vetted by our institutional review boards. So each academic institution, for example, has an ethics board. They're not paid by the pharmaceutical company. They're not paid, by NIH. They're a independent body to make sure that what we put forth as a protocol to recruit a participant is followed, and we aren't infringing on anyone's rights. They look at the science behind that to get us to this point. Right now, there are phase 3 studies that are out there recruiting, and that's what you probably are seeing through some different social media. And so if you refer back to my slides, the phase 3 is really trying to say, how can we get the number of participants up that reflect the population of our country so that we can say it can move into kind of phase 4, which is post-licensure. I don't know if that answers your question sufficiently or not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imblog. It answers like 5 questions in one. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Just
good.
one more.
Yes.
Just one more. Will the vaccination work like the flu shot where it's being administered to children? Will there be different doses?
So, as a pediatrician and physician scientist, mostly with children, I'm always like, children are always at the end. Usually the, trials are out there for adults, and then once it all worked out in terms of getting licensure, then we move into the children. So the conversation with children, I know is happening now. The details of that are so premature right now, even though I'm part of the vaccine trial unit for COVID. I'm a pediatrician that's going to see a bunch of adults, but that all that is to say, usually with how these trials work is that we get it all worked out with the adults, and then we start to look at what do we need to do to make it appropriate for children. And that's done with every, all the vaccines that trials that I've been a part of. So influenza, pneumococcal, all of those, we work it out with the adult situation, and then we come to the kids and say, okay, now infants, we know, they have, their immune system is not as mature. So what do we need to do about that? And then do studies again, going back. So I don't know that we're at that. Well, I know we're not at that point for the pediatric studies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imagla. Thank you so much information. I'll be handing over to Casey.
All right, thank you, Doris, for that. Well, at this point, we're just going to be taking like general questions. I know we're far gone for time, but there was a comment in the chat that I saw that I wanted to read out. This is from Evelyn Miller. It seems people are starting to vaccinate their children, then later on deciding not to continue vaccinating their children due to, because of concerns about ADD or autism. Is there anything that can be proposed to help with that?
Yes. So there is a lot of literature that's been reviewed and looked at in the Institute of Medicine has done extensive research on this topic. This is when I give the vaccine lecture or immunization lecture to the medical students, again, like I said, for over the last, more than 2 decades, this very question comes up. And I would say this is the take-home message on this. When we give MMR, it is recommended roughly between 12 and 18 months. That vaccine, if you look at developmentally for children, when children are babies, developmentally, they're, they're not expressive and they don't look like little people. When they get to be 18 to 24 months, they start to have their own personalities and they start to, become, I call them little people. Parents start to notice, when they go on a play date or a play group, that maybe their child seems to have the same small developmental features that they see in their play dates or playmates. So then they ask themselves, well, what went wrong? What's going on with my child? And if you ever see, MMR is one of those vaccines that if you've gotten it, and I have, it's painful. It's one of the ones that, oh gosh, it's not like smooth, it really does hurt and the babies cry. And parents, it's agonizing to watch your baby get their vaccine. So that's what they associate. They say, oh God, I went to the pediatrician and I got the MMR. And then they do a Google search and they start to see all this stuff. So I would say to you that the body of literature says to us that there is not a causal association between MMR and developmental delays or association with autistic features. It is more a temporal association. So it's a hard question to answer, but I think again, listening to parents and taking the time to explain to them, showing the science behind a vaccine and the benefits of that. There are measles outbreaks, you might have heard, all across the country, and there are certain pockets that are more so than others because they're close communities. They have not benefited from the herd immunity that we talk about. I don't know if that answers that question.
Well, that does answer that question. Thank you so much. I'm just going to throw it out for the next 3 minutes. Is there anybody that has a question? You can quickly raise your hand and answer the question so that Dr. Lilly can, at least answer your question. Anybody? I don't see anybody's hand up. All right. Well, if there are no questions, I honestly want to thank everybody today. Thank you, Dr. Lilly, for taking out a time out of your busy schedule to come educate us about these things with regards to vaccines, the safety, the facts, some of the issues that surround them. We really appreciate you for this. Thank you for everybody that has, taken out time to join us. Thank you to our PI, Dr. Priscilla Pimo. She's right there. If you can wave, thank you, that's her. And thank you, Gia, for joining us from the Atlanta Black Nurses Association. We really appreciate you. Thank you, April Wright, for helping make this a success. I also want to thank you to every other members of all the members of the Network of National Libraries of Medicine, NNLM. Sometimes it's a mouthful, but thank you. That's the Clayton County Libraries, Fulton County Library, and Gwinnett County Library. We really, really appreciate you, everyone from there. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we're going to be having a game day. That one is more fun than, this is a little bit more serious. We're talking about a serious topic that we need to pay attention to. But in 2 weeks, the 14th, to be precise, we're going to be having our game day. We're going to be playing a game. So, we want everybody to come in and join us and have fun, right? And now the way you can see information about that game day, apart from all the private emails we send and all that stuff, you can follow us on social media. So Instagram at all of us MSM, and on Twitter at all of them MSM. In fact, Facebook, this particular meeting is being streamed live today on Facebook. Same thing, just go on Facebook and search all of us MSM, and you should see us. You'll be able to get all the information regarding what we're doing, how you can help, how you can participate. If you want to be a contestant on the show, just hit us up and we'll be able to follow up with you, okay? Well, again, thank you guys. Thank you everybody who joined us. Please don't forget, I'm just going to reiterate one last thing. Go to msm.edu/allofus. Again, it's msm.edu/allofus. Just put your information in if you have not made up your mind as to whether you want to participate right away. And we will have your information so we can give you a call and have that whole conversation, and you see the importance of doing it. But for now, it's bye from me. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.